Hello everyone and welcome to Cappuccino with HR. My name is Rudi Bauer, and after 40 years in business, I'm 100% sure that the success of companies is directly related to the passion of the people working for these companies. With the Cappuccino of HR, we created a format where we really invite people, it's HR leaders, it's recruiters, it's talent acquisition guys, and we're talking about all the different kind of topics, and the range is going from AI, of course, to new work, to leadership, and all the challenges along the way. Yeah, hello and welcome back to Cappuccino with HR. We're starting season number 2, and I'm really delighted and I'm really happy to have Maggie with me. So Maggie Sailer, I'm allowed to call you Maggie, so official
Absolutely.
name is Margareta, but I know you with Maggie, and we met, I think, couple of years ago, and I think the first thing that I really was connected to you and I started to get connected with you was your book. I still have it with me, so it's
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much.
Culture Up, and I think I was really catched by the cover already, because it says the future is human centric.
Yes.
And how startups succeed by putting people first. And we're probably touching this topic as well. But today we are talking about upskilling fuels growth, or how upskilling could fuel growth. And yes. I think upskilling, as we are, I mean, if I'm walking around at HR conferences, if I'm walking around, if I'm talking to people, if we talk to guys in HR, I think retention is becoming more and more important compared to probably talent acquisition or getting talent. And I think therefore upskilling is probably a kind of a really hot topic. But before we start, Maggie, I would really ask you to briefly introduce yourself for those three people out there that don't know you.
I'm sure there's so many who don't know me. Yeah, but thank you so much, first and foremost, for letting me be here and actually have the time to talk to you, which is brilliant. I've been following We Are Developers and you obviously for quite a while now, so I'm always quite excited when I get invited to these things and be able to bring my own points across. Just a little bit about me. So I'm originally from Vienna. I'm originally from Austria. And I have lived and worked in the UK for the last 20 years. So I'm based outside of London. I'm based in Hampshire. And I'm here with my partner and my 2 greyhounds, and I absolutely love it. And maybe from my professional and personal background, I actually completed an apprenticeship in Vienna back in the days in a housing association to be an office manager, I suppose. That's the closest that you could describe it. And whilst I was in Vienna, I had jobs in customer service and in marketing. And when I came to the UK, that all changed. Lucky me, because I finally managed to get into my talent and HR jobs, which is actually something I always wanted to do. You know, I always wanted to work with people. I always wanted to look after people and do interviews and all of that good stuff. So I got very fortunate when I moved here 20 years ago to work with some really cool companies. You know, I've worked in recruitment agencies and did the typical headhunting jobs. And then I managed to get in-house to companies like BlackBerry, you know, when they were scaling like crazy. I worked for really large corporate companies like HP to really see what that's like, you know, to work for such a giant company. I was very, very lucky to be able to be one of the first 30 employees at Tesla back in the days, over 10, 15 years ago, when most people, let's be honest about it, didn't know Elon. And it was a very interesting time, very different from where the company is today. So literally the whole build-up was based around what my team and the business and the leadership could do together back then. So that was incredible. But I've also worked for companies like Lilium Aviation in Germany. And that actually led me later on, 6 years ago, to set up my own HR consultancy firm, which is called Mondaysquares. And I actually specialize on now supporting startups, small, medium businesses and scale-ups with all of their people topics. So whatever they need, most likely I've seen it, I've been through it. And luckily with my experience, I can now help them. So yeah, that's me.
Really cool, Maggie. And a question that I ask all the guests, as the format is called Cappuccino with HR, what is your favorite coffee?
Yeah, it's a good one. Actually, it is cappuccinos, got it in there. It used to be cafe latte in the past. It's cappuccino now, but I only drink one a day. Very unusual for an Austrian red. We're used to drinking our coffee. It's like the fuel of the Austrians, the secret ingredients that keeps us buzzing. But I normally in the afternoon switch to green tea, matcha teas, all of that. But cappuccino is my go-to.
Oh, really cool. Thank you very much. As we're talking about upscaling, and I mean, we are living in a world where AI is taking over, where AI is all around. I think there's a hell of a lot of fear. I think people are normally resistant to change. So I think there's a kind of, if we could avoid it, we try to avoid it. Yeah. And we had a really nice discussion before we started, before Ivana pressed the record button on the kind of how did people feel hundreds of years ago in first industrial revolution? Yeah, and it should be kind of, probably it's a very similar feeling at the moment if we talk about AI. So there's a lot of uncertainty. How important do you think is, or why is it so important, critical now to really get this right, to really help or build a safe space for upskilling and for taking that fear away from people?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, generally speaking, we are in the fourth industrial revolution. But this revolution is very different to the first or the second one, first one when we got our, steam engines, and then the second ones where we started mass manufacturing. And actually in the second revolution in the 1900s, that's when HR was established, purely and simply because we needed more health and safety in the environments that people were in. But and the third industrial revolution, which is something that you and I have seen actually, in the sense that, the computers got introduced, the internet got introduced, all of that, but we're now in the fourth industrial revolution. And that feels very different. I mean, I'm sure that our ancestors must have felt similar to how we feel now, but the fourth industrial revolution is very different in the sense that, we're dealing with an artificial intelligence, and we are really merging the physical, the digital, and the biological spheres. So it's all driven by AI. It's, our augmented reality, it's the Internet of Things, it's everything around us that we have now experienced in the last, 5 years, so onwards. And obviously that existed earlier. But what makes it so different actually is that this AI drive will change the way we work. It will create positions that have never been here before, same as in all the other industrial revolutions, but we will also see jobs going away. And we've already seen jobs going away, if we think about customer service jobs, for example. So yes, there is an anticipation, and I think there's a fear from people, because actually with the rise of AI, of course, we will see certain jobs not being here, but then on the other hand, the jobs that we need to prepare our workforce now, and this is why internal development is quite crucial, is because we're actually preparing them for the more strategic roles. So, a lot of the administrative side of things, and let's be honest, I don't know what you're like, Rudi, but, I do my admin. I've been in recruitment and HR for a long time now, for the last 20 years. But it's not the most enjoyable thing for me personally to do my admin and to sift through various informations and put them together. And this is where AI can really help us. I mean, I'm not sure how you feel in your daily life, but I love my apps. I like the fact that I can, before Ivana pressed the button, we talked about banking on your mobile phone. I love the fact that I don't have to go necessarily to a bank anymore. I like the fact that I can literally just push my phone onto the card reader and it's paying. So it really does depend on how we look at it, right? So, but I understand the fear, and this is what we need to work on as a HR department. Mm-hmm. So it's actually a really interesting time for HR, I find personally. We're in a very crucial time, and a time where HR needs to be a strategic part of the business. So actually, you and I, funnily enough, when we met before, we talked about this a little bit. We touched on it. I think in a lot of ways over many, many years, when it comes to business strategy, apart from some company, but when it came to business strategy, HR was a bit more of an afterthought after the business strategy was completed. But going back to a human-centric environment, as Mareike and I talk about in Culture Up, Actually, the human side of it now is imperative to your strategy. You cannot get around that anymore. So the business leaders now, they have to actually take HR to the strategic table right from day one and make decisions together. So for HR, we are changing a lot, not just the fact that we're having all this AI coming up and popping up everywhere, and that has been going now for years and years. If you think about the industry, the HR industry, the technology industry has really existed probably since, I don't know, what was it? I've looked into it the other day, 2019, sort of, it really started to boom, right? So really started to boom. Or actually, no, it's a little bit earlier than that. So it really started to boom in the 2000s. And now I'd say in the last 10 years, we saw so much HR tech coming in. I mean, it's $1 billion industry. It's not going away anywhere, right? But this is why we're overwhelmed with the tech. But now actually also we as HR people, we change because we are being invited now to the strategic table. It is expected from us to go to the strategic table. It is expected from us to use data. So our jobs are changing. But actually, personally, for me, I see this as a good thing. I see this as growth for the individuals. Same as it was growth for me in my career, going through all the stages. We're just going through another era of growth, and AI actually helps us with that. I mean, I don't know what you're like, but I use AI already for my business, and it makes me a lot smarter in many ways. I'm not good at everything. I don't know how you see it.
I think we have to get used to use it in the right way. I think there's a lot of distraction along the way as well with everything technology, and I think it needs this kind of focus. It needs this kind of clear understanding where are the real problems. But what I miss sometimes a little bit, and I'm interested in your view on it, is are we curious enough to deal with it? Because I think my life always was driven by curiosity. I'm an extremely curious person. And sometimes if I watch the ecosystems out there, if I talk to people, I sometimes have the impression that some of them love that there's no change, everything is stable, it is a little bit like it was before. And do we have enough curiosity within our society?
It's a good question. I think throughout the history of time, this is my personal view, I think you will always have people who are curious by nature. I think you have always people that are more driven by nature potentially than others. So I think we've always had that. We have always had some of us who are naturally entrepreneurial versus others are not. So there's two sides to it, right? So right at this point in time, probably we don't have enough curious people because some people are scared and that hinders them. The fear hinders them of opening their minds. But there's a way how you can actually help your workforce to overcome that, and we'll talk about it later, actually. But there's another side actually to it that I find quite interesting. When you think about the workforce, and actually why we also have to change how we work anyway. So when you think about the workforce, Generation Z is pushing into the workforce, is already in the workforce. And if you think about Generation Alpha, those who are born around 2010, they're starting to push into the workforce now. And these type of people have a completely different other level of curiosity or adaptability to AI. Because these guys, our children, our nieces, nephews, our friends' kids, they have already grown up with this curiosity of pressing buttons, having everything at any second, having all this information available to them at any given time. So I think that generation, in some ways, already has that naturally. So they have the ability to work quite well in this AI landscape. But there is obviously a generation in between, same as it was 10, 20 years ago, when the internet came aboard and everybody was like, internet, what the hell is the internet, right? Same as it was 10, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, there is a generation of us who needs to step up. And some of us will step up and some of us won't, I think. But again, organization can actually help their workforce to make the change. And I actually think it's an organization's responsibility to take their employees through this journey. I think it's really imperative actually for any company to create a strategy to take people with you it's all about making them understand AI. Like you said, like your conferences that you guys are creating with We Are Developers, getting people together and, connecting them to the tech people, to the tech, and actually showing them, look, it's a good thing. It will help you. So that's what I think. That was a long-winded answer to your question, wasn't it?
No. I think it's perfect. What do you think is necessary to establish that within organizations? As you said, I mean, of course, the easiest way would probably be go out on the market and fetch the people that have this curiosity. Yeah. But if you have an existing organization, if you have a team, if you have a kind, normally people are leaning back on their successes. I mean, that's a natural behavior. So if we have been successful with something for years, we normally tend to continue. I mean, I think that's a really normal behavior. But now in times like this, if the world is changing so quickly, if we need to adapt to what's going on there, what is needed within an organization? I mean, you probably had the same kind of experience within Tesla and Lilium. I mean, when Tesla started, and you started when it was 30 people, or this kind of size, or probably a couple of hundred people.
Yes.
The company had nothing to do with traditional car building manufacturer. I mean, it looked like a car at the end of the day, yeah. But the technology, all the knowledge was totally different. How can you manage, or what is needed to build an organization, or to set the basis for an organization that is able to adapt these kind of trends and technology changes? What is the ingredient on the basis?
Yeah, I talk about Tesla, and then I'll probably go a bit more generic in after that. So Tesla was interesting, right? Like you said, it actually created a computer on wheels, essentially, right? And pushed us into the next sort of century, and thankfully, so, we got some really cool cars on the road now, and electric cars. What it was with Tesla, it was interesting because I've always believed in recruiting people based on not just their background, right? That's the natural choice. When you recruit somebody, then you look at what have they done before, which universities did they go to. But Tesla wasn't so much like that, right? So yes, of course, in certain roles, that's important. That's sure, I mean, if you're a doctor and you perform surgery, you gotta take somebody who does it. But Tesla was very much focused on hiring people based on behavior. So it was a behavioral way of interviewing. I've always interviewed like that. I've always very much believed in it, because what you're trying to establish with behavioral based interviewing is how a person solves problems. And this is what made Tesla so successful, because we typically focused on people who could solve problems, who had been through difficult times in their private lives or in their work life. We figured out, how does a person help themselves? What did you do outside of work? It's one thing doing their job. What did they do outside? Maybe somebody actually works on cars in the private side, or they actually, work with AI, or they go and do something completely different from their day-to-day job, like going hiking regularly and learning how to survive, in really difficult, extreme environments. So we recruited a lot like that. So we already created a workforce purposefully that could deal with stress, that could deal with ever-changing environments, that could deal with figuring stuff out that nobody had done before. So that was the recruitment part, right? And actually, unlike something you wouldn't believe, but Tesla wasn't the most heavy digitalized internally either. You would think you were, but actually that was only on the start of having so many new apps and systems, and that wasn't there 10, 15 years ago, right? Even LinkedIn hasn't existed that long. If I think about it, LinkedIn is probably around now for 20 years or something like that. But So this is what I'm trying to say. So, but it was the mindset and the ability of the people to actually push. And then, of course, you had a very strong-minded CEO who communicated very clearly. He communicated his vision, his mission constantly. So there was a lot of energy coming from an individual like Elon, making sure that he got his workforce to understand what we needed to achieve, and people were very excited about it at the time. So that's Tesla. And I still believe that works for any other company if you're recruiting. But I think right now for any business, it is actually really important that you take your employees on a journey, because you need to be able to train them in how to be more adaptive, how to problem solve, how to think outside of the box. I'll go to that in a second. But I think it's really important that you take them on a journey, because you need to have your humans work alongside AI. You need to make them, you need to form a friendship. So yeah, so there's a couple of things that I think are quite important, actually. And I think the most important thing actually is at the moment, and this is an interesting one, I actually believe, and I fully believe, that it is not just your workforce that needs to be clued up on AI. I actually think your leadership team needs to be completely clued up on AI, not just to drive the strategy, but actually also understand what's happening. How can AI help us? How can it make us more competitive? How can it save us time? So I think your leadership team actually needs to be trained technically what's out there, what this technology can do for us. So there's a couple of things, right? And I can talk to you later about what I think we need to train people on, apart from the normal technical skills. I have my own thoughts around that, if I'm honest with you as well.
How important do you think is that would have anyhow been my next question. It doesn't it have to start with leadership? Because I think you need to implement AI in a way in your vision and your mission and your daily strategies. And I think you need to sync the leadership team probably first on understanding what's in it. What I experience sometimes, we were talking about, you mentioned it in the very beginning of our discussion, that AI can solve all this kind of boring stuff for us. And probably that is an idea that everyone likes. If you look on AI, and my experiences with AI is, sometimes I have the impression that AI is doing the creative stuff. So, it can compose songs, it can write poems, it can define nice text. I haven't really met the solution for getting rid of the boring stuff. So, but I saw a lot of crazy stuff, which really normally makes fun for myself as well. So, composing songs, I'm not good in doing that. So AI is much better than me. But that is what if I would pick and choose the time that I could spend for things, I probably would go for composing songs instead of having Excel spreadsheets. But sometimes I have the impression that AI is loving the creative stuff more than the boring stuff as well. So is there a danger?
I think it depends on what industry you're in and actually what your hobbies are like, right? But if you think about manufacturing, for example, actually, even if we think about robotics, the first robots were introduced in manufacturing environments in the 1960s. And since the 2000s, you see more and more robots taking over the really heavy, backbreaking work that individuals and humans would have done in the past, right? Which then obviously, I understand, displaces certain workforce, but even car manufacturers have helped people pivot and develop into more strategic technical roles, management roles, and so on, right? Or if we think about retail, for example, so again, getting back to the usefulness, if you think about retail, again, depending on which country you are born in or live in, we see some of the technology coming over quicker, but think about retail and self-checkout. So these self-checkout stations have been around for quite a while, but I really think that in most countries, you actually have only seen them rise after COVID. You only really saw self-checkout stations. So it depends on which industry you're in and how it actually helps. But again, it's taking away that more mundane work, and it would leave us to go and potentially study or go into something that we're really interested in. This is how I see it, right? I'm sure that not everybody sees it like that, but actually it would enable you to look at different things in the future. And there will be different jobs created because of AI in different industries than to what we have now today as well. So
how important do you think, Maggie, it will become to differentiate between, AI could replace some jobs easily and some very difficult. If you look on a plumber, for example, or an electrician, I think if you have these people in your teams, it's probably very unusual that the AI will ever take these jobs. I don't see a technical solution there, but at the moment. But if you look on probably HR or probably some roles in HR or probably some kind of lawyers within your organization or kind of bookkeeping accountants, this could easily be replaced. So how important do you think, if you want to be future-proof as an organization, how important do you think it will become to really have this in mind as well if you talk about upskilling your people? I mean, developers, for example, I think the developer role, this is our core business, I think the developer role will change dramatically in the next couple of years with the use of AI. But how do you handle that? Because, I mean, this is adding another level of complexity, I think, because
it does.
It's not AI which covers all your activities within your company. It really depends on the role. It really depends on the function. It really depends on the job. How important do you think is to retain the right people? Because, I mean,
I think actually that's the most important part, right, for any organization, because you have people that you want to keep in your organization that potentially work well with your culture, or add to your culture in significant ways. You know, there's potentially people who really understand your business, your customers. So for any company, this, retention isn't something new to us. And I'll give examples later of which companies have done retention pretty well over the years. Retention has an awful lot of benefits. So there's a couple of things. So if you're an individual, obviously you can't get around AI anymore. So one way to future-proof yourself as a person is to actually learn to understand AI and work with it and actually upskill yourself. So communication skills will be a lot more important in the future because we're still humans. We're not replacing humans at this point in time. I'm not sure what's going to happen in the future and if you and I will sit here in physical form or not. But the reality is we're not going to replace all humans really quickly. So people still buy from people. Right? People still need to take AI and look at everything that it has analyzed and created, but it's a human who will make the decision in the end based on all the info, what the next strategy is or what the next move for the company is or what actually needs to change in the company to make your customer more happy or your employee more happy. So the reality is we still need humans, but it's just how we work is different. So actually understanding AI is the important part, and then going on about having your other skills to upskill it. So when we think about the software teams, for example, there is still a lot of cybersecurity work that needs to be done because cybersecurity, because of the way the world is, that's imperative for any company. I've worked in a cybersecurity firm for a year, a while back. And I learned so much about it, and it's so important for any country, and any company. And I'm not just talking about defense, right? So even for the software teams, there is other industries again that are going to see a complete and utter boom. And it's same now. I mean, look at Facebook, who is building those massive centers outside of California, where they take all of the guys that know how to work with AI, and you still need people like that. But for a software developer, it's about pivoting, changing, figuring out what industries are going to be booming in the future, like renewable energy. We will still need to build infrastructure. There's still companies who need your skills. And for us non-technical people, it's important to understand the tech and then continuously level up. And for the tech people, it's, again, more important to take those communication skills, learn how to project management, for example. Because I really think that the future will see a lot more. This is my prediction. I'm not saying this is going to come true, but I think the future will be that we will have less middle managers. We will have people on the top that are very highly strategic. I think we will have less middle managers, but more project managers that will then work with individual team members. But I do think that it is imperative for companies in the future to have more mentors or coaches who coaches the individuals underneath about their personal development. So how do they develop as people? How do they resolve conflict? How do they communicate? All of that. This is what I think we're going to see in the next 10 to 15 years in companies. I think we will see that shift because quite often middle management have been promoted into their jobs because they're good at their jobs. That doesn't mean necessarily that they can manage a budget well. That doesn't necessarily that they can work with people well. And sometimes they don't even like that either. So I think that will change. So yeah, and now I lost my train of thought. Sorry, Rudi, now I've gone off on a tangent.
I mean, what I see if it comes to software developers, I mean, I think it's probably not the job of coding some lines. I think it's probably more understanding the solution, finding the right tools, and orchestrating this kind of development. So I think that's probably a change, and that's probably also the change for all the leadership functions within organizations, that we need to find the right balance between. I mean. For me, AI should stay a toolbox. I mean, it's a kind of toolbox. Probably it's a kind of a virtual colleague. Yeah, it could be that we start with agents. I think we are definitely very close to these virtual colleague things. But at the end of the day, it's managing a team of real people and probably AI, and find the right balance of making both sides feel quite well. And there's some kind of conflict potential in it, because I mean, I had a discussion at our HR Leader Summit. I was talking to Syed from HelloFresh, and asking the question: is it important to say please and thank you to AI if you ask ChatGPT, for example? And because,
I do.
Yeah, I do as well, because honestly, I think if a society stops doing it, it automatically will stop doing it with humans as well. So I think it becomes a natural behavior. If we treat our agents and AI like a kind of a tool, really a tool, and without any kind of thank you and hello and please, I think we definitely end up doing the same thing with humans as well. So I think I see this danger. I don't know if I'm right, but I see this danger for myself.
No, I hear you. And you know what? It actually brings me to another point. When you think about training your people for the future, and when people think about, the jobs are going away, your jobs will be changing. Some jobs will go away, there will be others. But again, what you actually just said to your point, interacting with AI, we still need to train people to understand AI and learn with it and getting fluent in it. But the other side is the ethical judgment, because we still need to look after AI, what it does, and regulate it to an extent, right? It's kind of going back to your please and thank you, not specifically in that, but it's about humans still need to, again, look at the data, make judgment, but also make judgment about what our systems do, what do our virtual colleagues do, is that because they're still learning. I mean, they're learning incredibly fast. I mean, even if I think about, I was born in the 80s, the type of tech we had then, the type of tech we have now, and how much faster it went. It's gonna be like light speed development. But you still need humans to make a judgment ethically if these tools are doing what we want them to do. Is it right? Is it wrong? And we then reprogram them. Yes, code can write itself these days, but you still need a human to monitor it, to potentially change it, to send it onto a different path. Kind of like you do with your children. You figure out one of your children maybe goes off the wrong path, and you try to bring it back to the right path, right? So, so I think it's, again, like you said, I think AI is going to become, and already has become, a team member, and that's how it should be seen. And the ethical interaction with it, I personally think, is quite important. Oh yeah.
If you look at trends or technologies that you were working for, really, I think it was always at the edge of the companies you worked for, was always at the edge. I mean, Tesla was at the edge at this time. I mean, Lilium was at the edge. I mean, it's flying cars. Yeah. So I think so. There's a lot of uncertainties. There's a lot of risk. There's a lot of. I think people still tapping on their head and say, okay, what is going on there? What kind of trends do you see coming up within the next couple of months and years from your point of view?
So I think it's a good question, right? I think so. There's different things. For HR specifically, I actually think we will see. Obviously, there's already a lot of HR tech, right? And actually, I think it's becoming too much. So I think that we will probably see amalgamation of some of the big companies with some of the smaller ones. Because when you look at this already incredibly good skill matching platforms, for example, or platforms that you can do workforce planning on, which is quite important actually as the whole part of, redeveloping your own workforce. So there's some really cool tools out there, and we can talk about it later, or I can leave it somewhere in the comments, what tools I quite like. But I think because there's so much tech now and so many new companies popping up, and if you think about the workforce today, I find that even if you're in a company right now, you're already overwhelmed by how many tools there actually are and how many systems you're actually using. Your user adaptability goes down the minute you have too much. It's kind of like on your phone. I don't know what you are like, but I have quite a few apps on my phone. And the reality is I probably only use 2 or 3 mostly. And the others are living there and I've probably paid for it. It's kind of like my gym membership. I've paid for it and I never use it. So I actually think future trends in HR specifically, I think that we will see some of these companies amalgamating and having a bigger service than just one of them have. I do believe that we will continue to see all the gamification and the virtual reality and the micro-learning for your employees that will be important. But I also think actually that everything will become more personalized as well. Because if you think about it, if you have really key members of your team, no company runs without its people, and if you have really good people and you've worked with them, you know what I mean by that, right? So there's people who come brilliant, right? But you need to be more specific about how you develop them. So I actually think people development, there will be a blanket slate of how we develop people, but it will then go very specifically into this person. What does this person need? So I think that's going to be a trend for the future. And like I said to you before, because I still think actually that that we will change how companies are set up, or I can see there is a need for probably having more project managers and coaches. I really think mentorship coaching programs, that will be imperative in the next 5 to 10 years. And actually something that you guys wrote an article about recently is mental health and well-being. So therapy, because your work will shift, it's not just work. The world is shifting rapidly. We are surrounded by a lot more negativity in the news and everywhere else. You can't get away from it. The work environment is changing, and you might feel constantly it's you against AI, which shouldn't be the feeling. I get it, but you might feel like that. So I think employee well-being, your mental health, your therapy, your employee assistance, stress management, I think that will become a really big part of the future when it comes to HR and how we're helping a workforce develop and thrive in very uncertain, difficult times, if I'm honest with you.
I mean, if you're talking about, I think, mental health and well-being, and at the end of the day, it's still part of our lives, and I think work is a big part of our life. I mean, we are spending a hell of a lot of hours in our jobs, and I think we are not even leaving this space. So, and I've got one basic setup which I think is extremely necessary if you talk about mental health and if you want to set the foundation for that. And I think it has a lot to do with HR. It has a lot to do with leadership. It has a lot to do with communication. I think what you need to set up first in every organization, and I think that's the necessary first step, is getting a kind of a safe space, because all these things just work if you set up a kind of a safe space where people really feel they are able to talk about it. And I mean, this needs a kind of, this is really trust building, because I mean, you can't write it on a billboard. I mean, your really safe space is something which people need to find themselves as a safe space, and they have to really feel it.
Yeah, and you know what? I think you're hitting the nail on the head, so to speak, in what we say here in England. Because there's a couple of things, right? So if you think about the generations, so when I think about my dad and my mom, and when they entered the workforce, it wasn't normal to create a safe space or let people feel heard or seen or anything like that. And I don't think necessarily that was brilliant. I'm sure that, I mean, you were used to it, right? Our parents were used to it, our grandparents. but I'm sure that they would have probably hoped for a more human-centric environment, and some of them will have contributed to create better working conditions. If I think about my great aunt, for example, she'd be a tram driver after the war, and she, for example, campaigned to have in Vienna, she campaigned to have better work clothing. So this is what I mean. Some of us will push. So if you think about tram drivers in the 60s or something like that, or before that, they only had one set of clothing. In the winter, in the summer, it didn't matter. So in the winter they were freezing. In the summer they were okay, but in the winter they were freezing. And so nobody wanted to speak up. So she would go build a union and go to them and say, look, our guys, men and women, we need warmer clothes in the winter, and what we have at the moment is great, but it's not fit for the winter. So what I'm saying is there's always somebody who pushes forward. But now actually having this people-centric environment and having a safe space is so important. Why is it so important? Because we were brought up different. We were brought up to be more emotional intelligent by our parents and not go through what they had to go through before. And if I think about my niece and nephew, and again, the generations are coming, we have learned to teach them how to question, which is great, right? It's something people now don't like when new people come on board and they're constantly asking questions like, why are they asking questions and working? I'm like, well, probably because you have brought them up that way. Or, your sister, I don't know. But you need that safe space because we have evolved, and that's a good thing. It's good to have a human-centric environment. I think personally, that's the person I am. It's good to think about others. It's good to not just think about yourself. It's good to think of the greater of the world, right? So this is why it's so important to have that safe space. And again, we need it. We already need it, right? So my generation, but these generations coming after, they need it even more. And they also need it because they're going to be born into this complete and utter uncertainty in life. And you obviously have, misplacement through war and through nature, with all the catastrophes that are going on, how the weather is changing, you will see people being displaced. Then we have a lot of things going on. So yeah, so that mental health space that you guys talked about recently, that's super important.
Look at the watch and the clock.
Yes.
I think we have to come to an end, and I have one final thing which I really wanted to ask you. If you would set up one question that people should have in mind if you're talking about this upskilling AI, how to handle it, what could be a question that you could give as a tip to HR people out there that they should ask themselves? You have one in mind?
It's a really good question. Rudi, I'm not sure if I can answer the question quickly, but I think the one question is, how do we take our people on the journey? How does AI fit into the company strategy? That's actually something HR and the business needs to do. Is how do we enable our people? I think that's a question. How do we enable our people with the rise of AI? And how do we take them on a journey? I think that's the question businesses, including HR, have to ask themselves. And there's many ways and many questions, and I could go on about this forever, how you can do that and what you should be asking. I think that's the main one.
That's a really good one. Maggie, thank you so much for your time. I think we could have continued for another 2 hours. That's normally, if we meet, we normally end up like this, but I really enjoyed it. So probably we need to do a second episode talking about the topic or a similar topic with you. So we will come up with some thoughts on that. Thank you very much. Thank you, the audience, for listening. I hope you all enjoy this episode with Maggie as much as I do or did with your recording. Thank you so much for having your time, and hope to see you soon again in person. Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for watching Cappuccino with HR. If you enjoy this kind of conversations, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Then you get all this kind of upfront information, your upcoming episodes, and all my nice guests. Cappuccino with HR is brought to you by We Are Developers, Europe's #1 developer community and a leading platform for connecting HR and companies together with developers. If you want to learn more, visit us on wearedevelopers.com. Thank you again for watching, and see you next time on Cappuccino with HR.